The door shook under the pounding fists. When Thomas opened it, 6 Lakota widows stood drenched in the storm, eyes wide with fear. "Please, let us in." But as they stepped inside, Thomas saw something in the dark behind them, and his heart froze. Rainwater ran in rivers off their shawls, pooling on the wooden floor. Lightning flashed, and for a split second, Thomas thought he saw a shadowy figure on the ridge beyond his fence. But when he looked again, the darkness was empty. "Lock it," the oldest widow said sharply, glancing over her shoulder. Thomas hesitated. He hadn't locked that door in 20 years, but the urgency in her voice made him slide the bolt. He had lived alone since the fever took his wife and son, and in all that time, visitors had been rare. 6 at once, never. They clustered near the fire, speaking in low Lakota, the younger ones stealing glances at the window. "What's going on?" Thomas asked, pouring coffee into tin cups. The woman didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed on the storm-lashed door. Finally, she said, "We had nowhere else to go." One of the younger widows gasped at a sharp crack outside. Just a branch, Thomas told himself, but the way their shoulders tensed said otherwise. He tried again. "Did someone send you here?" This time, her gaze met his. "No one sent us, but someone might follow." The words hung in the air, heavy as the rain on the roof. Outside, another gust rattled the shutters, and Thomas felt it. The strange sensation that the storm was not the only thing closing in on his cabin tonight. Thomas set a kettle on the stove, his eyes drifting to the youngest widow. She was clutching a leather bundle to her chest like it was part of her. The others seemed to guard her without making it obvious, always standing between her and the door. "You'll be warm soon," he said, trying to sound calm. "This storm will pass by morning." The oldest woman, who hadn't given her name, shook her head. "It's not the storm we fear." Before Thomas could press her, a sudden creak echoed from the porch. His hand instinctively went to the rifle mounted over the mantel. He opened the door, nothing but rain in the lantern's glow. But the mud outside bore a single, fresh footprint, not his. He closed the door and slid the bolt again. "If you're in some kind of trouble," he said, "you need to tell me now." The women exchanged glances. Finally, the second oldest spoke. "We walked 3 days from Pine Hollow. Men there, they decided we had no right to live alone. They would have taken our land, our lives. We had to leave." Thomas felt his jaw tighten. He'd seen men like that. Small towns with smaller minds. But Pine Hollow was a long way. Whoever those men were, they'd have to be determined to track them through a storm like this. The youngest widow shifted, and for the first time, Thomas caught a glimpse of what she carried. A weathered satchel, the kind cowboys used to carry ledgers or deeds. Her knuckles whitened as she noticed his stare and turned away. He poured coffee for everyone, the steam curling into the air. "You can stay here tonight," he said, "but come morning we need to decide what to do." A sharp thud cut him off. It came from the barn. Everyone froze. "I'll check," Thomas said, grabbing the rifle. The oldest widow's voice was low, urgent. "If it's them, you can't fight alone." He stepped into the rain, boots sinking into the mud. The barn door swung slightly in the wind. He pushed it open, inside. His horse snorted nervously, eyes rolling toward the back wall. Thomas followed the animal's gaze, but found nothing. Only the rope he'd left coiled on the wall, now lying on the floor. When he returned to the cabin, the youngest widow was standing, the satchel still in her hands. "They know we're here," she whispered. Another gust rattled the windows. This time, Thomas wasn't sure if it was the wind or something else moving outside. Thomas set a kettle on the stove, the hiss of the flame a small comfort in the uneasy silence. His eyes kept drifting to the youngest widow, a girl who couldn't have been more than 20. She clutched a leather satchel tight against her chest, her knuckles pale from the grip. The others seemed to orbit around her protectively, never letting her out of arm's reach. "You'll be warm soon," Thomas said, trying to sound casual. "This storm will pass by morning." The oldest woman, her hair streaked silver, shook her head slowly. "It's not the storm we fear." Her voice carried a weight that made Thomas pause. Before he could press her for more, a sudden creak echoed from the porch. His hand moved instinctively to the rifle mounted above the mantel. He opened the door a crack, just enough to peer into the night. Rain lashed sideways under the lantern's glow. Nothing moved, but the mud outside bore a single fresh footprint, not his. Sliding the bolt home, he turned back to them. "If you're in some kind of trouble," he said evenly, "you'd better tell me now." The women exchanged glances, the flickering firelight catching the tension in their eyes. Finally, the second oldest spoke. "We walked 3 days from Pine Hollow. Men there decided we had no right to live alone. They wanted our land. And worse, we had to leave before they made us disappear." Thomas knew the kind. Small towns, small minds, big appetites for control. Pine Hollow was far. Whoever those men were, they'd have to be determined to track these women through weather like this. His gaze shifted back to the youngest widow. When she turned slightly, he caught the edge of the satchel in the lamplight. Weathered leather, scuffed from years of use. Not the kind a woman would normally carry. Cowboys used them for deeds, ledgers, or sometimes letters they didn't want seen. "Sit, rest," he said, pouring steaming coffee into tin cups. "You can stay here tonight, but come morning we'll have to figure out our next move." A sharp thud cut him off. The sound came from the barn, muffled but distinct. Every head in the room turned. "I'll check," Thomas muttered, taking the rifle down. The oldest widow's voice followed him, low and urgent. "If it's them, you can't fight alone." He didn't answer, stepping into the rain, boots sinking into the mud. The barn loomed in the darkness, its doors swinging slightly in the wind. Lightning cracked overhead as he pushed one open. Inside, his mare shifted nervously, nostrils flaring. Her eyes rolled toward the far wall. Thomas followed her gaze, expecting to see shadows. Instead, he found an empty corner, save for the coil of rope he'd left hanging on the wall. It now lay in the straw, uncoiled, as if someone had dropped it in a hurry. He bent, fingers brushing the rope. It was damp, but not from the rain. The barn had been closed until now, which meant someone had been inside. The mare snorted again, ears pricked toward the loft. Thomas raised the rifle, climbed halfway up the ladder and scanned the hay. Empty. Still uneasy, he returned to the cabin. The youngest widow was standing now, the satchel still in her grasp, her eyes locked on his as he stepped inside. "They know we're here," she whispered. Another gust rattled the shutters, but this time Thomas swore he heard something beneath the wind, a distant, deliberate crunch of footsteps in the mud. The oldest widow moved closer to him. "If we tell you why we came, you'll want to send us away." Thomas shook his head. "Not if telling me keeps us alive." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "That bag she's holding, it doesn't belong to her. It belonged to my husband. And there are men who would kill to get it back." Thomas looked at the satchel again. Whatever was inside wasn't just paper. He could see it now, how the girl's arms strained slightly under its weight. He opened his mouth to ask what was in it, but the youngest widow suddenly gasped. The others spun toward the window. A figure stood at the edge of the tree line, barely visible in the rain, watching. When lightning flashed again, the space was empty. But Thomas's gut told him the storm had only brought the beginning of their trouble. The fire crackled, but the warmth didn't reach anyone's bones. Thomas kept his rifle leaning against the table, close enough to grab. The women huddled together, their eyes darting between the window and the door. "You said men might follow," Thomas began, "but you didn't say how close they were." The second oldest widow took a slow sip of coffee before answering. "Close enough to smell the smoke from your chimney." Thomas's jaw tightened. "Then they've been here longer than this storm." The youngest widow, still clutching the satchel, shifted uncomfortably. Her dark eyes met his for the briefest moment before dropping to the floor. "They want this," she said quietly. "What's inside?" Silence. The women exchanged looks, as if deciding whether to trust him. Finally, the eldest spoke. "Proof. Enough to ruin the men who run Pine Hollow. Deeds they stole, signatures they forged, the lies they buried. If the law sees it, they lose everything." "And you think they'll just let that happen?" Thomas asked. "They'd rather bury us than let these papers be read," the eldest replied. A sudden knock, 3 hard raps, echoed from the back door. Every head snapped toward it. Thomas's cabin had only one back door, and it opened straight into the trees. He moved quietly, motioning the women toward the fire. "Stay put," he whispered. The back door's latch rattled. Thomas pressed his ear to the wood, nothing but the sound of rain dripping from the eaves. He yanked it open, rifle ready, empty. But in the mud just beyond the threshold, fresh boot prints led away into the darkness, and lying on the step was a strip of leather, the same kind used for reins, cut clean. Thomas shut the door and bolted it. "They've been around the barn and here. They're testing where we're weakest." The oldest widow's voice was steady but cold. "They won't wait for daylight." He poured more coffee, buying time to think. His ranch sat in a small valley, one road in, one road out. The storm made it near impossible to leave tonight, but staying meant waiting for trouble to walk right in. The youngest widow spoke again, this time to him directly. "Say, if you help us get this to Fort Laramie, we can end this, but we can't go alone." Thomas leaned back in his chair. "That's 3 days' ride in good weather. In this storm, with someone on our trail, it's suicide." A faint metallic clink came from the porch. Thomas froze. It wasn't the wind, it was the sound of a spur against wood. He moved to the window beside the door and peeked out. A man stood under the shadow of the awning, head bowed against the rain, hat brim dripping. Lightning flashed, and Thomas caught the glint of a rifle barrel. He stepped back fast. "There's one out front, armed." The women stiffened. The eldest moved toward the satchel, but the youngest clung to it. "I'll keep it," she insisted. Another flash of lightning lit the porch, and the man was gone. Thomas cursed under his breath. "They're playing with us." The second oldest widow walked to the hearth and tossed another log into the fire. Her hands were steady, but her voice trembled. "They'll keep circling until we panic. Then they'll move." The storm raged on, rattling the windows. Thomas paced the room thinking, if they want the bag, they'll come in here to get it. That means they need us alive long enough to find it. The eldest shook her head. "No, Thomas. Once they have it, we're nothing to them." He knew she was right. He also knew that every second they stayed put, the odds tipped further against them. Then, from somewhere in the darkness outside, came a long, low whistle, the kind used to signal across open land. It was answered by another, closer this time. The youngest widow's grip on the satchel tightened until her knuckles went white. "They've found each other," she whispered. Thomas grabbed his rifle and turned toward the women. "We don't have until morning. We move now." The eldest stepped in front of him. "You can't lead 6 of us through this storm without leaving tracks they'll follow, and they know this land better than we do." Another whistle, closer still. The sound slithered through the rain like a warning. Thomas glanced at the satchel, then at the youngest widow. "Then we need to make them think the bag's still here, while we take it somewhere they'll never find." The fire popped loudly, sending a spark into the air. Outside, the wind howled, but this time, Thomas swore he heard the faint crunch of boots on his porch steps. Thomas moved to the window, peering into the darkness. The porch was empty again, but the hair on his neck refused to settle. He turned to the eldest widow. "If we're leaving, it's now or never." The women exchanged glances. The youngest still clutched the satchel, refusing to let it leave her grasp. The second oldest stepped closer to her. "Let me carry it for a while." The girl shook her head quickly. "No, I'm fine." Thomas's eyes narrowed. "You two related?" The eldest answered for her. "No, she's someone we met on the way." That was the first thing all night that didn't sit right. Thomas had assumed they were all from the same place, bound together by loss. But meeting on the way, with something like that satchel in play, his gut tightened. Before he could press further, another whistle cut through the rain, short, sharp, and closer than ever. "They're here," the eldest whispered. Thomas grabbed his slicker and pushed it into the youngest widow's hands. "Put this on. We're going out the back." The women followed him to the kitchen door. He unbolted it, then stopped cold. In the mud just beyond the threshold was a single boot print, facing toward the door. He motioned for them to step back and shut it quietly. Someone was waiting here. The eldest's face went pale. "They know we're trapped." The fire popped, sending sparks across the hearth. Thomas's mind raced. There's a root cellar under the floorboards in the bedroom. You'll all fit if you squeeze. Stay there while I deal with whoever's outside." The eldest began to protest, but he cut her off. "This isn't a debate." He led them to the bedroom, pulled up the loose plank, and helped each woman down. The youngest hesitated at the edge. "Go," he said. She climbed down slowly, the satchel still in her hands. For a second, Thomas thought he saw her slip something from her pocket into the bag. When they were hidden, he dropped the plank back in place and crossed the room. He was halfway to the front door when a shadow moved past the window. He ducked low, rifle ready. The door latch jiggled once, then twice, then went still. Thomas waited, counting breaths. Finally, he stepped outside. The storm slammed into him, soaking him in seconds. He scanned the yard. Empty. But then he saw it. A strip of fabric snagged on the porch rail. He pulled it free, heart sinking. It was from one of the widow's shawls. He bolted back inside and yanked up the bedroom plank. The cellar was empty. The wind roared through the cabin as he realized the impossible. 6 women had been hidden, and now they were gone without a sound. All except one thing, the satchel still sat on the cellar floor. He picked it up. It felt lighter, much lighter. He flipped the latch open. Inside were a few papers, some blank, some covered in meaningless scribbles. The real contents were gone. Thomas's pulse pounded, which meant only one thing. Someone had taken them and slipped out into the storm while he was watching the porch. He grabbed his coat and the rifle, stepping back outside. The wind whipped the rain sideways, but he could make out faint footprints heading toward the ridge. Behind him, a voice spoke from the shadows. "Looking for someone, ye cowboy." He spun, rifle up. A man stood near the barn, hat pulled low, rain streaming off his coat. In the dim light, Thomas saw the faint glint of a revolver at his hip. "Where are they?" Thomas demanded. The man smiled thinly. "Safe. For now. But that bag you've got, worth killing for—" Lightning split the sky, and in that flash, Thomas saw movement behind the man, 2 more figures, closing in. He stepped back toward the door, rifle steady. "If you want it, you'll have to take it from me." The man's smile widened. "Oh, we will." Another flash of lightning lit the yard, and in that instant, the 3 figures were gone, swallowed by the storm. Thomas stood in the rain, the empty satchel in his hands, and understood the game had just changed. He wasn't protecting 6 widows anymore. He was hunting one woman who'd lied to everyone, and whoever was helping her. Thomas slammed the cabin door shut, rain dripping from his hat brim onto the wooden floor. The satchel lay on the table, a hollow shell of what it once carried. He stared at it for a long second, jaw tight. Someone had played him, and done it under his own roof. Boots on coat pulled tight, he stepped into the storm again. The wind clawed at him, but the faint trail of footprints toward the ridge was still there. He followed fast, rifle in hand, heart pounding with every step. Halfway to the ridge, the tracks split, one set leading uphill, the other circling toward the creek. Thomas crouched, running his fingers over the prints. The lighter set was small, woman's boots. The heavier ones were wide and deep, moving fast. Not one of the widows. A flicker of light caught his eye, a lantern swaying in the distance, uphill. He started toward it, keeping low. Behind him, a voice cut through the wind. "You're following the wrong trail, cowboy." Thomas spun, rifle up. A tall man stood by a dead tree, coat flapping, face shadowed. "Where are they?" Thomas barked. The man stepped forward, hands loose at his sides. "One's headed to Pine Hollow, the other. She's not going anywhere you can follow." The words were bait, and Thomas knew it. "You're wasting my time." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Time's all you've got left." Thomas didn't answer. He turned uphill, but the man's voice followed him. "Careful, there's more than one hunter out tonight." The lantern light vanished. Thomas reached the top of the ridge, breathing hard. The wind tore at his coat, and below in the valley he spotted movement, 2 riders pushing hard toward the tree line. One small frame hunched over the saddle horn. He started down, boots sliding in the mud. But before he could reach the valley floor, a rifle shot split the night. The round slammed into the ground inches from his boots. Thomas dove behind a fallen log, scanning the slope. Another shot rang out, closer this time, Whoever was shooting was high, steady, and patient. He waited for the pause between shots, then bolted toward a cluster of boulders. His boots splashed through a shallow stream, soaking him to the knees. The shooter's third shot chipped rock by his head. Thomas risked a glance back. A figure on the ridge, too far to make out, but steady behind the rifle. He had no choice but to move deeper into the trees, out of the shooter's line. Inside the tree line, the rain was muted, but every sound carried. He slowed, listening. Hoofbeats, faint but constant, moved away from him. He pressed on, following the sound, until he reached a small clearing. Hoofprints crisscrossed the mud, but one set was fresh. He knelt, fingers tracing the edge, same size as the youngest widow's boots. From the corner of his eye, movement. He swung the rifle up, only to find the eldest widow standing 10 yards away, soaked to the bone, eyes sharp. "You're supposed to be at the cabin," he said. She shook her head. "I saw her leave. She's not who you think she is." Thomas stepped closer. "Then tell me who she is." The eldest hesitated, glancing over her shoulder. "Not here, they'll be on us any—" A branch snapped nearby. The eldest froze, eyes wide. Thomas raised the rifle, scanning the trees. A man stepped out of the shadows, revolver low but ready. "Evening," he drawled. "I'll take the bag you're chasing." Thomas kept his rifle trained. "You'll have to take me first." The man smirked. "That can be arranged." Before he could raise the revolver, a second shot rang out from somewhere behind Thomas. The man staggered, clutching his arm, and vanished back into the trees. Thomas turned to see the eldest holding a smoking pistol, jaw tight. "Move," she ordered. "We've got minutes." They ran together, following the hoofprints. The trail led to a narrow pass where the rain turned the ground to slick clay. The tracks vanished into a tangle of brush. "She's trying to throw us off," Thomas muttered. "No," the eldest said, scanning the trees. "She's leading them to someone worse." Before Thomas could ask, a lantern flared ahead. The youngest widow's silhouette appeared for a split second. Then another figure stepped beside her, tall, broad-shouldered, and armed. The lantern went out, leaving only the sound of hoofbeats retreating into the black. Thomas stood frozen in the dark, rain dripping from the brim of his hat. The image of the youngest widow with that broad-shouldered man burned in his mind. She hadn't been running from danger. She'd been running to it. Beside him, the eldest widow's breath came fast. "That man, I've seen him before," she whispered. Thomas turned sharply. "Where?" "In Pine Hollow. He runs the freight line. But that's not all. Folks say he's the one who makes people disappear." The words hit like a hammer, and she went to him willingly. A sudden creak of saddle leather echoed ahead. Thomas crouched low, signaling the eldest to follow. They moved through the dripping brush until they reached a break in the trees. Down in the hollow, the man and the girl were dismounting near an old way station, half collapsed, roof sagging, but still enough shelter to hide in. Thomas pulled back. "We can't take them head-on." The eldest shook her head. "You don't know him. He doesn't travel alone." As if to prove her point, 2 more riders emerged from the opposite slope, leading a pack mule. One carried a rifle across his saddle. "They're loading something," Thomas said, eyes narrowing. The mule's panniers sagged under the weight of whatever they were packing. The eldest's voice dropped. "It's not just the papers. She took gold, too." "Bribes, payoffs, everything they were hiding." Thomas's stomach tightened. "Then she's not planning to expose them. She's cashing out." A sudden metallic clang rang out from the way station. One of the men cursed, kicking at a crate. The sound carried over the rain. The eldest leaned close. "We can circle east, come up behind them." Thomas considered it, then froze as a glint of light flashed in the trees to their left. Someone else was out here, watching the same scene. He motioned for silence and crept toward the glint. Through the wet branches, he spotted a man lying prone, rifle braced, eyes locked on the way station. He wasn't with the freight line men. His coat was army issue. Thomas slid back. "We've got another player," the eldest frowned. "Friend or enemy?" Thomas shook his head. "Doesn't matter. If he fires, they scatter, and we lose her." From below, the youngest widow's voice floated up, laughing. It was the first time Thomas had heard her laugh. It wasn't relief, it was satisfaction. The freight boss handed her a small oilskin packet. She tucked it into her coat, then mounted her horse again. "They're moving," Thomas hissed. The eldest pointed east. "If we cut through the ravine, we can head them off." They scrambled down the slope, mud sucking at their boots. The ravine narrowed to a choke point, where a fallen pine blocked most of the trail. They crouched behind it, listening. Hoofbeats approached, 3 riders, then the mule. The youngest widow was in the lead, eyes scanning ahead. For a moment, Thomas thought she'd spot them, but before they could spring the trap, a rifle cracked from the ridge. The freight boss's horse screamed and reared, throwing him into the mud. The girl shouted something Thomas couldn't hear over the chaos. More shots followed, splinters flying from the pine trunk. Thomas grabbed the eldest's arm. "Back, we're caught between them." They dove into the brush as the freight men fired back toward the ridge. The girl spurred her horse, breaking away from both sides. "Damn it," Thomas growled, pushing through wet branches. "She's making for the south trail." They burst from the brush just as a rider came from the opposite direction, nearly colliding with Thomas. It was the army-coated sniper, rifle now slung, pistol in hand. He leveled it at Thomas. "You're in my way." Thomas didn't lower his own rifle. "She's got something that could bring down half of Pine Hollow." The man's expression didn't change. "Exactly why she's mine." A shot rang out from behind them, the eldest widow firing into the air. Both men turned, but she wasn't aiming at them. She was pointing toward the ridge. Thomas followed her gaze. Dozens of riders were spilling down the slope, lanterns swinging, guns glinting in the rain. The army man's jaw tightened. "You just ran out of time, cowboy." The youngest widow's silhouette flashed once more in the lantern light, already vanishing into the tree line. And now 3 forces were converging: the freight men, the army sniper, and whoever commanded that wave of riders. Thomas felt the noose tightening. "We need to pick a side. Right now." The eldest shook her head. "No, we make our own side, or we don't survive the night." Rain poured harder, drumming against Thomas's hat as he scanned the chaos. The freight men had drawn their guns, firing toward the advancing riders. The army sniper dropped into a crouch beside him, returning fire with quick, precise shots. "You want her alive, you'll cover me," the sniper barked. Thomas didn't lower his rifle. "I'm not covering anyone who won't tell me who they work for." A bullet hissed past, splintering the pine beside his head. The eldest widow yanked him down. "Pick now, Thomas. Those riders aren't here to talk." The lead of the advancing riders, a stocky man in a black oilskin, shouted orders in a voice that cut through the storm. His men fanned out, some heading straight for the way station, others toward the south trail. Whoever they were, they moved like they'd done this before. The freight boss, still in the mud, scrambled to his knees and pulled a short-barreled shotgun. "Get me that girl," he yelled to his men. Thomas's gut told him if the freight crew got her first, she'd vanish for good. But if the black oilskins riders reached her, she might end up worse than gone. The sniper's eyes flicked toward the ridge. "One chance. We flank left, cut through the rocks. We'll get ahead of her before either side does." Thomas looked at the eldest widow. Rain streaked her face, but her eyes were steady. "If you trust him, you're gambling with more than your life." A gunshot cracked from behind, a freight man dropping to the mud, clutching his shoulder. The black oilskins riders were closing fast. Thomas cursed under his breath. "Fine, but if you double-cross me..." The sniper didn't wait for him to finish. He was already moving, low and fast toward a jagged line of rocks. Thomas followed, the eldest close behind. Bullets smacked stone around them as they darted between boulders slick with moss. They slid down the far side of the rocks into a narrow gulch. The rain pooled here, turning the ground to sucking mud. Above them, the sound of hoofbeats pounded along the rim. Fast, urgent. The sniper paused, listening. She's close. 2 riders with her. Thomas's voice was low. 2, who's the second?" Before the sniper could answer, a horse's scream echoed down the gulch. A riderless mount burst from the trees, eyes wild, nearly colliding with them. Its saddle was empty, one stirrup swinging. The eldest's face paled. "That's hers!" They ran, splashing through the mud. The gulch narrowed, funneling them toward a sharp bend. As they rounded it, they saw movement, a figure struggling in the mud, tangled in a fallen branch. It was the youngest widow, coat torn, The oilskin packet clutched to her chest. She looked up, eyes wide when she saw Thomas. "Help me." He slowed, scanning the trees. Too easy. No guards, no second rider. The sniper raised his rifle toward the tree line. "We're not alone." A voice floated from the shadows. "Step away from her, cowboy." 3 men emerged, rifles leveled, black oilskins riders. The leader's face was hard, water streaming from his brim. "She's coming with us." Thomas kept his own rifle steady. "Not without telling me what's in that packet." The leader's lip curled. "More than you can handle." The eldest stepped forward, voice sharp. "And more than you should be trusted with." The tension snapped when the sniper fired, dropping one rider where he stood. The clearing exploded into chaos, guns barking, mud flying. The youngest widow scrambled to her feet, bolting toward the rocks. Thomas lunged after her, shoving past the leader's swing. A shot grazed his sleeve, the heat searing his arm. He ignored it, diving and catching her coat. She fought like a cornered animal, twisting and clawing at his grip. The oilskin packet tore free, falling into the mud between them. Both reached for it at the same time, when another gunshot rang out, inches from Thomas's head. He looked up to see the freight boss on the ridge, shotgun smoking, eyes locked on the packet. Now all 3 factions were in the same place, the prize lying in the mud, and no one willing to back down. The rain came down in sheets, flattening the grass and turning the clearing into a churn of mud and shadows. All eyes were on the oilskin packet, lying in the muck between them. Thomas's boots were planted, rifle steady, but every muscle was tight, ready to move. The freight boss stood on the ridge, shotgun aimed low, calculating. "No one's walking away with that unless it's me," Black Oilskin's leader sneered. "Then you'll walk away in a pine box." The youngest widow's gaze darted between them, chest heaving. "You don't know what's in there." Thomas's voice cut through the storm. "Then tell us." She shook her head, stepping back an inch. "If I do, none of us leave alive." The sniper shifted his stance, eyes flicking toward Thomas. "I'm ending this." "Don't," Thomas warned, but the sniper had already raised his rifle. The freight boss fired first. The blast blew mud into the air, forcing Thomas to duck. In that split second, the youngest widow snatched the packet and bolted toward the tree line. "Stop her!" the leader roared. 2 of his men lunged, but Thomas shoved one aside, swinging the rifle stock into the other's ribs. The man crumpled, wheezing. The sniper took down another rider before vanishing into the brush, chasing the girl. The freight boss reloaded, moving down the slope with slow, deliberate steps. Thomas caught a glimpse of something on his belt, a ring of brass keys, each one different. They rattled like a warning. Black Oilskin's leader lunged for Thomas, grabbing the front of his coat. "You're with her." "I'm with the truth," Thomas growled, breaking his grip. The leader's fist came fast, grazing Thomas's jaw. Thomas countered, slamming him into the mud. They rolled, boots and elbows striking, until the sound of a gun cocking froze them both. The eldest widow stood a few yards away, pistol aimed squarely at them. "Enough. She's headed to the South Fork. You'll lose her while you're swinging at each other." Thomas wiped rain from his eyes. "Then we move." The leader hesitated, but the freight boss's men were regrouping on the ridge, rifles ready. The choice was clear: fight here and die, or chase the girl. Without another word, Thomas and the leader sprinted for the South Fork, the eldest on their heels. The path narrowed into a tunnel of wet pines. Branches slapped at their faces, mud sucking at their boots. Ahead, faint hoofbeats pounded, a rhythm that sped Thomas's pulse. They burst into a small glade just as the sniper grabbed the girl's reins, yanking her from the saddle. She hit the ground hard, the packet still clutched to her chest. Thomas closed the distance, shoving the sniper back. "She's not yours." The sniper's jaw tightened. "You think you know what that holds? Open it. See for yourself." Before Thomas could respond, the freight boss crashed into the clearing with 2 men, guns drawn. "Drop it," he barked. Black Oilskin's leader emerged from the opposite side, weapon raised. Now 6 armed men, plus the girl, all in a circle. The eldest widow moved slowly toward the girl, her free hand open. "Give it to me. I'll end this." The girl's voice trembled, but her eyes were fierce. "You can't end it. You'll just start something worse." Thomas stepped between her and the others. "We're not leaving until someone explains what's in that packet." The freight boss smirked. "Fine, it's a ledger. Names, dates, shipments. Proof of every deal that's kept this territory under my thumb for 10 years. The leader's tone was cold. "And proof that half your partners are wearing badges." The revelation was a gut punch. Thomas realized the truth. Whoever held that packet controlled the fate of the entire region. The girl clutched it tighter. "Which is why none of you should have it." The standoff broke when a shot rang out from the trees, grazing the leader's arm. The woods erupted. More riders. Another faction drawn by the noise and gunfire. Thomas grabbed the girl's arm. "Move!" They sprinted for the far edge of the clearing, bullets tearing through branches overhead. The eldest followed, firing back without looking. Behind them, the freight boss's voice roared commands, but the chaos swallowed his words. As they reached the tree line, Thomas risked a glance back, just in time to see the oilskin leader slam a man into the mud. The packet still in the girl's hands as she vanished into the shadows ahead. The forest swallowed them, moonlight breaking only in fractured shards through the wet canopy. The youngest widow ran ahead, her boots barely making a sound over the damp earth. Thomas's breath burned in his chest as he kept pace, the eldest widow right behind him. From somewhere far off, riders' shouts echoed, faint but closing. "Slow down!" Thomas hissed. The girl didn't. She vaulted a fallen log and kept running, clutching the packet to her chest. Thomas pushed harder, but the eldest grabbed his sleeve. "Stop! Listen!" They froze. The forest was quiet except for the drip of rain from the branches. Then came a different sound, twigs snapping, deliberate to their left. "They're flanking us," Thomas muttered. The eldest's eyes scanned the shadows. Not just one side, both. The girl had stopped ahead, chest rising and falling. "I know a way," she whispered. Thomas hesitated. Trust was a luxury they couldn't afford, but staying put meant being surrounded. "Lead!" She took them down a narrow deer trail, weaving between slick rocks and low branches. The path dropped suddenly, forcing them to slide down into a shallow ravine. The air here was colder, heavy with the smell of wet earth. Halfway through, the girl stopped, crouched, and pulled a length of cord from her coat. She tied it between two saplings at ankle height. Thomas frowned. "Trap. For the ones behind us?" she said, not looking up. The eldest's voice was low. "And if it's the wrong ones?" The girl didn't answer. She was already moving again. They climbed out of the ravine just as a gunshot cracked behind them. A shout followed, the sharp curse of someone hitting the ground. The trap had worked, but it wouldn't buy much time. Ahead, the forest opened into a clearing scattered with rotting fence posts. An abandoned homestead slouched at its center, walls warped, roof half caved in. The girl headed straight for it. Thomas caught her arm. "That's a death trap, one way in, one way out." Her eyes met his. Exactly. Inside, the air was stale, thick with dust and the faint scent of old smoke. The girl moved to a corner and began pulling up warped floorboards, revealing a dark cavity beneath. The eldest crouched beside her. "A cellar." The girl shook her head. "Root pit. My father dug it to hide supplies during the bad winters. No one knows it's here." Thomas peered inside. It was cramped, damp, barely enough for the three of them. "If they find us..." "They won't," the girl cut in. Before Thomas could argue, the sound of hoofbeats rolled into the clearing. Lantern light danced through the cracks in the walls. They slipped into the pit, lowering the boards back into place just as boots hit the porch outside. Voices murmured. 3, maybe 4 men. One voice was unmistakable. The freight boss. "Spread out, she's close." Another voice, colder. Black oilskin's leader. "I'll take the far side. You two check the barn." Thomas's grip tightened on his rifle. The boards above creaked as footsteps moved through the house. Dust rained down. A boot heel stopped directly over them. For a long moment, no one breathed. Then the sound of spitting, and the man moved on. They waited until the voices faded, replaced by the receding clop of hooves. Only then did Thomas push the boards aside. The girl climbed out first, scanning the clearing. "They'll circle back. We have to move before dawn. Thomas wiped dirt from his hands. Where? She hesitated. There's a bridge south of here. If we cross before they cut us off, we can reach the old mission. The priest will hide us. The eldest's brow furrowed. Or hand us over for the bounty. The girl's jaw tightened. He owes me. They moved quickly, staying low through the underbrush. The rain had eased in, but the air carried the damp chill of night. Every shadow felt alive, every rustle a threat. As they neared the river, the sound of rushing water grew louder, and so did the shouts behind them. Lanterns bobbed in the darkness and was closing fast. The bridge came into view, its planks slick, the rope handrails sagging. Thomas stepped onto it, but the girl pulled him back. "Wait," she whispered. "They're ahead of us too." Shapes emerged from the far bank, riders blocking the way. Now they were trapped between two closing forces. Thomas's mind raced. "We cut the bridge, make it look like we crossed, then drop it." The eldest shook her head. "We'll be stranded." "Better stranded than caught," Thomas said, already drawing his knife. The girl glanced once toward the packet in her hands, then toward the dark river below. "Or we drop this, and none of them have a reason to chase us." The choice hung in the cold night air as the hoofbeats closed in from both sides. The river roared below, black and swollen from the storm. Lantern light flickered on the far bank where the riders waited, rifles across their saddles. Behind, more voices drew closer. The crunch of hooves and the jingle of tack carried on the damp air. Thomas's knife hovered over the frayed bridge rope. "We cut it. Now." The eldest widow's voice was sharp. "And then what? We'll be trapped with no shelter, no food." The girl stepped forward, the packet pressed to her chest. "There's another way. Give it to them. Let them fight over it while we slip away." Thomas's jaw clenched. "That ledger puts half the men in this territory in the ground. You hand it over, you sign your own warrant." From the far bank, the freight boss's voice boomed. "Come on across, cowboy." "We can talk this out," Black Oilskin's leader called from behind them. "Or toss me that packet and I'll make sure you live through the night." The girl's eyes darted between Thomas and the water. "They'll kill us either way." Thomas met her gaze. "Not if they can't find it." Before she could react, he snatched the packet from her hands. She lunged for it, but he stepped to the edge of the bridge. Lanterns on both banks flared as the men realized what he meant to do. "Don't you dare!" the freight boss roared. The leader's voice was pure fury. "Drop it and you're dead before you hit shore." The eldest widow's hand clamped on Thomas's arm. "Think, if you do this, there's no going back." Thomas looked at her, then at the girl. Maybe that's the point. A shot cracked from the far bank, splintering the rope beside him. He staggered, the packet nearly slipping from his grip. The girl grabbed his coat. "If you drop it, they'll hunt you for the rest of your life." He leaned close enough for only her to hear. "They're already hunting me." Before she could stop him, Thomas swung the packet in a wide arc and hurled it into the black current. Lanterns jerked toward the river, shouts exploding on both banks. The freight boss cursed, sending two men scrambling down the bank. Black Oilskin's leader fired toward the water, the muzzle flashes lighting the night. Thomas didn't wait to see if they found it. "Run!" They bolted off the bridge and plunged into the trees on the opposite side. Gunfire tore through the night, splintering branches overhead. The ground here sloped upward, slick with mud. Thomas pushed the girl ahead, the eldest bringing up the rear. The roar of the river faded, replaced by the pounding of hooves as the factions turned their fury on each other. They reached a ridge and collapsed behind a line of boulders, lungs burning. The eldest peered back through the trees. "They're fighting each other. You bought us time." The girl wasn't convinced. "They won't stop until they know who has it." Thomas stared into the dark valley below. "And now they don't know, which means they'll tear each other apart trying to find out." For a moment, the forest was still, then a sharp whistle cut through the night. The girl's eyes widened. "That's not them, that's someone else." Shapes emerged from the shadows to their left. 3 riders, no lanterns, moving with precision. Their faces were hidden under wide-brimmed hats, rifles slung low. The lead rider dismounted, boots silent on the wet ground. "You have something that belongs to me," he said in a low voice. Thomas stood slowly. Not anymore. The rider's gaze shifted to the girl. Then you're no use to me." In one smooth motion, the eldest widow stepped between them, her pistol leveled. "Try me." The standoff was taut, breath hanging in the cold air. Then the rider smiled faintly and stepped back. "We'll see you again, cowboy." Without another word, the strangers melted back into the trees, their hoofbeats swallowed by the night. The girl let out a shuddering breath. Who were they? Thomas shook his head. Not part of the freight boss's crew. Not oilskins either, which means there's more at stake here than we thought. The eldest's voice was grim. "And we're in the middle of it." Thomas scanned the forest, the wind carrying the faint scent of smoke. "We can't stay here. We move before sunrise." The girl hesitated. "Where?" He didn't answer right away, eyes fixed on the distant glow to the east. "Somewhere they'll never think to look." A branch snapped deep in the woods, closer this time. The girl's hand went to her knife. Thomas's voice was low. "We're not alone." And then the night erupted again. The glow to the east grew brighter, flickering against the treetops. Smoke curled into the damp air, sharp and acrid. Thomas knew it wasn't from a campfire. It was too thick, too steady. Someone was burning something big. The eldest widow crouched beside him. "They're flushing us out." From the west, the faint echo of hoofbeats filtered through the trees. Closer this time, Thomas's grip tightened on his rifle. Two groups, maybe more. They're sweeping the ridge. The girl scanned the shadows. "Then we move now." They started north, keeping low, weaving through the undergrowth. The forest floor was littered with slick leaves and hidden roots that caught at their boots. Every step was a choice, quiet but slow, or fast but loud. Halfway down the slope, the girl froze. A low whistle drifted from the darkness ahead. Different pitch than the one they'd heard earlier. Thomas raised a hand for silence. Two men stepped into the faint moonlight, rifles slung but hands near the grips. Their hats dripped with rain, shadows hiding their eyes. "Evening," one of them said, voice calm. "Looks like you've had a rough night." Thomas didn't lower his rifle. "Keep walking." The man's gaze flicked to the girl, then to the eldest. "We're just here to offer a little escort. The boss is willing to talk terms." The eldest's jaw tightened. "Your boss doesn't know when to quit." The second man took a slow step forward. "You hand over what you've got. We make sure you walk out of here breathing." Thomas's voice was flat. "It's gone." The men exchanged a look, then smiled. "Then you're worth less than we thought." The girl's hand slipped to her knife, but Thomas caught her wrist. "Not here," he murmured. He stepped forward, the barrel of his rifle steady. "Move." The two men hesitated, then stepped aside. But as Thomas and the women passed, one called after them, "East isn't safe. Try west." It wasn't advice, it was a warning. They kept moving until the voices were swallowed by the forest. The ridge dipped into a shallow ravine, the air heavy with the scent of wet moss. A faint metallic click stopped Thomas cold. He crouched, brushing away leaves to reveal a thin wire stretched across the path. His stomach dropped. "Trap!" The eldest knelt beside him. "Tripwire." He nodded. "Connected to something bigger. Could be a snare, could be worse." The girl's voice was tight. "They're ahead of us." They skirted the wire, moving into thicker brush. The ground grew marshy, sucking at their boots. Somewhere in the distance, a single shot rang out, followed by a man's scream. Then silence. They reached higher ground, but the respite was short-lived. The crackle of fire was louder now, and the air was turning warm. Thomas glanced back. The glow was spreading, licking up the ridge behind them. "They're herding us," he said. The eldest pointed ahead. "There's a cut in the hills about a mile north. We can use it to lose them." They pushed on, pace quickening, branches whipped at their faces, the forest alive with movement. A shape darted across the trail ahead, a man gone before they could react. Thomas raised his rifle, scanning the trees. "They've got scouts," the girl's voice was low. "Then they know exactly where we are." As if to confirm it, a horn blared from the west, answered by another to the east. The sound rolled over the hills, closing in. Thomas's pulse hammered. "We can't outrun them, not all of them." The eldest met his eyes. Then we make them come to us. They found a narrow choke point where two boulders formed a natural corridor. Thomas positioned himself behind one, the eldest behind the other. The girl crouched low, knife ready. Minutes stretched into hours in the dark, but the forest noise kept shifting. Branches cracking, leaves rustling, voices too far to make out. Then came the first shadow, slipping between the trees. A man moved into the corridor, rifle up. Thomas waited until he was halfway through, then stepped out, barrel pressed to the man's side. "Drop it!" The man froze, then grinned. "You should have run!" From the trees, another shadow moved. Too fast. Thomas shoved the man forward, just as the second attacker lunged. A shot rang out, the eldest's pistol bucking in her hands. The second man dropped, clutching his shoulder. Shouts erupted all around them, lanterns flared, voices shouting orders. The girl grabbed Thomas's arm. "We have to go." He fired a warning shot into the darkness, then pulled her toward a narrow deer trail behind the rocks. They ran blind, feet slipping on the wet ground. Ahead, the trail ended abruptly at the edge of a cliff. The river roared below, churning white in the moonlight. The girl's breath caught. "We can't." Thomas looked back. Lanterns were closing in from every direction. "We can." The eldest stared at the drop, then at him. "So you're out of your mind?" Thomas's voice was calm, almost steady. "Better the river than their hands." From the darkness, the freight boss's voice rang out. "Last chance! Cowboy!" Thomas stepped to the edge. "No," he said quietly. "It's yours." And then he jumped. The cold hit like a fist, driving the breath from Thomas's lungs. The river swallowed them, tossing their bodies in its black, icy grip. Water closed over his head, pressing in from all sides. He kicked hard, breaking the surface just long enough to gulp a lungful of air before the current dragged him under again. Somewhere in the chaos, he heard the girl scream. He turned, saw her struggling against the pull, her knife still clutched in one white-knuckled hand. Thomas fought the current, arm outstretched, fingers closing around her wrist. The eldest surfaced beside them, coughing hard. "Go with it!" she shouted. "Fight later." They let the current take them, the roar of the water drowning out the shouts from above. Lantern light flickered on the cliff's edge, but the riders made no move to follow. A jagged branch shot past, spinning in the torrent. Thomas pulled the girl closer, shielding her from debris. The river twisted suddenly, flinging them against a slick boulder. Pain exploded in his shoulder, but he pushed off, riding the surge toward calmer water ahead. Minutes felt like hours before the current eased. They drifted into a wide bend where the water slowed, moonlight glinting off the ripples. Thomas's boots scraped gravel. "Here," he gasped, dragging himself and the girl onto the narrow bank. The eldest staggered out behind them, hair plastered to her face. "Everyone alive?" The girl coughed, eyes wide. "For now." Thomas scanned the tree line. The forest here was silent, too silent. "They'll be looking downstream." "We move inland." They pushed through undergrowth, clothes heavy with water. Every step sent cold deeper into their bones. The girl shivered violently, clutching her knife as if it could ward off the chill. After half an hour, they found an overhang where the rock jutted out above a small hollow. Thomas built a fire with shaking hands, the flames casting jittery light over their faces. The eldest watched him closely. "You've done this before." He didn't look up. "Jumping into rivers more times than I'd like." The girl sat apart, staring into the flames. Finally, she said, "You should have let me drown it." Thomas frowned. "What?" "The ledger," she said. "I should have taken it down with me, ended it." He shook his head. "You ending it wouldn't stop them. They'd still be hunting someone." The eldest's gaze shifted between them. "So what now? We can't run forever." Thomas fed another branch into the fire. "We don't have to run forever. Just long enough to make them turn on each other for good." The girl's eyes narrowed. "And how do you plan to do that without the ledger?" He gave a small, grim smile. "Because they don't know it's gone for good. And if we plant the right lie..." A sound cut through the night, a faint snap of a twig. All three froze. Thomas killed the fire with his boot, plunging them into darkness. The girl's breathing quickened. Footsteps moved slowly through the undergrowth, circling their hollow. A lantern bobbed in the trees, its light sweeping closer. Thomas raised his rifle, motioning for silence. The eldest drew her pistol, eyes locked on the shadows. The figure stepped into view, a man in a soaked duster, hat pulled low. He stopped just outside the reach of the lantern light. "You're hard to find, cowboy." Thomas didn't lower the rifle. "How you followed the river?" The man's smile was faint. "Didn't have to, you left a trail." The girl rose, knife ready. "What do you want?" The man's gaze flicked to her. "The same thing they want, but unlike them, I'm willing to trade." Thomas's tone was cold. "We don't have it," the man chuckled. "Maybe, but you've got something better. Names, routes, hiding places. You've been inside both camps now. That's worth more than paper." The eldest's eyes narrowed. "And if we refuse?" The man's smile faded. "Then I take it from you." For a heartbeat, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Then, in the distance, another horn sounded. Low, drawn out, and too close for comfort. The man's head turned toward the sound. "Looks like you're out of time." Thomas stepped forward, rifle steady. "So are you." The horn blared again, closer. Voices shouted in the dark. Lanterns were moving through the trees from two different directions. The man cursed under his breath, backing away. "We'll finish this later." He melted into the shadows just as the first riders broke through the tree line. Thomas turned to the women. "We run east, now." They plunged into the forest, the night alive with pursuit. The ground dropped sharply, forcing them to slide down a bank into another ravine. At the bottom, the girl stopped short. A wall of jagged rock loomed ahead. No way over, no way around without being caught. Behind them, the thunder of hooves grew louder. The eldest raised her pistol, eyes hard. "Then we make our stand here." Thomas looked at her, then at the girl, then back at the narrowing path behind them. He knew she was right. But as the first lantern light spilled into the ravine, he spotted something, a narrow fissure in the rock, just wide enough for one person at a time. He grabbed the girl's arm. "In there. Now." The eldest followed without hesitation. Thomas went last, the shouts of their pursuers echoing off the walls. The passage swallowed them in darkness, the air damp and cold. Somewhere deep inside, a sound rose, a low, steady roar that wasn't the river. The girl whispered, "What is that?" Thomas's answer was quiet, almost grim. "If I'm right, it's our only chance." The roar grew louder with every step, until it swallowed the sound of their breathing. The narrow fissure twisted and dipped, forcing them to crawl at times. The damp air reeked of minerals and something older, earth that hadn't seen light in centuries. The girl's voice was a whisper. "It's water." Thomas nodded. "Underground river. Strong one." They reached an opening where the walls fell away into a cavern. Below, black water surged, foaming white as it crashed against jagged rock. A faint shaft of moonlight cut down from a crack in the ceiling, glinting on the torrent. The eldest crouched beside him. "That thing will kill us." "Not as quick as they will," Thomas said. Behind them, the echo of boots on stone bounced down the passage. The pursuers were inside. The girl's hand trembled on her knife. "We don't even know where it goes." Thomas looked at her, steady. "We just know it's away from here." Shouts grew clearer. Lantern light flickered against the rock walls. The eldest took a deep breath. "If we do this, there's no turning back." Thomas chambered a round in his rifle. "Then we do it right." He fired toward the passage mouth, the shot deafening in the enclosed space. Sparks burst from the rock, sending the first man diving for cover. "Go!" The girl hesitated only a second before leaping. The water swallowed her instantly, dragging her into the dark. The eldest followed, her scream cut short by the river's roar. Thomas glanced back, 3 men charging now, guns up. He fired again, then threw himself into the torrent. The shock of the cold was a knife to the chest. The current grabbed him, pulling him under, smashing him against unseen rocks. He fought to surface, catching glimpses of moonlight through the ceiling cracks before the water spun him down another channel. Somewhere ahead, the girl's voice echoed, muffled, frantic. He kicked toward it, lungs burning. His hand closed around her arm just as the current hurled them both into a pool of calmer water. The eldest was there, clinging to a rock ledge, coughing hard. "They're not stopping," she rasped, pointing. At the far end of the pool, light flickered, lanterns bobbing and closing in. Their pursuers had found another way down. Thomas scanned the walls. Above, a narrow slope led to what looked like another opening, faintly lit. "Up there!" They scrambled toward it, boots slipping on wet stone. Shots cracked, splintering rock around them. The girl reached the opening first, hauling herself through. The eldest followed, wincing as a bullet grazed her sleeve. Thomas was last, ducking inside just as the next shot sparked at the entrance. They emerged into a smaller tunnel, the air warmer here, scented faintly with pine. Somewhere ahead, wind sighed through an unseen exit. The girl slowed. "Do you hear that?" Thomas did. Hoofbeats. Not from behind, but ahead. They rounded a bend and froze. 4 riders blocked the tunnel mouth, silhouettes against the faint night sky. The lead rider nudged his horse forward. "You've been making a lot of trouble." The eldest raised her pistol. "And you've been following the wrong people." The man laughed. "Maybe. But here's the thing. You're out of road." Behind them, the echo of boots and voices swelled again. They were trapped. Thomas's mind raced. The space between the riders was narrow, but enough for one shot, one break. If they could take the lead horse down, they might scatter the rest. He leaned toward the eldest. "When I fire, go left. Don't stop." She gave a tight nod. The lead rider's smirk widened. "Any last words?" Thomas's rifle cracked, the blast echoing like thunder. The lead horse reared, screaming, throwing its rider. The girl darted left, slipping between 2 startled mounts. The eldest was right behind her, firing at a second rider who swerved to block. Thomas drove forward, slamming his shoulder into another man's leg and sending him crashing to the ground. They burst into the open night, the cold air cutting like glass. The forest stretched ahead, moonlit and wild. "Keep moving!" Thomas shouted. But even as they ran, he knew the chase wasn't over. The hoofbeats behind them were already recovering. The eldest gasped, pointing toward the east. "There! Ridgeline! If we make it, we can lose them!" They sprinted, hearts pounding, every step an effort. The ridge loomed ahead, a sharp drop on the other side. The girl skidded to a stop at the edge, staring down at the misty expanse below. "It's too steep." Thomas turned, saw the riders breaking through the tree line. No more time. He met the eldest's eyes. "Hold on to her." Then, without another word, he pushed them both over the edge. The ground vanished, the world tilting into freefall. The wind tore at their clothes, the night swallowing their screams, and they crashed into darkness. They didn't fall far. A ledge caught them, a shelf of sand and shale hidden by fog. They hit hard, then lay still. Above, hooves skidded. Men cursed, stones clattered into the void. Thomas rolled first. The girl blinked. The eldest sat up, hissed, and cradled her wrist. "Sprain," she gritted. "Move," Thomas rasped. "Before they find the switchback." He pointed to a goat path angling along the cliff face, no wider than a boot sole. Moonlight painted a ribbon ahead. Wind shoved at their backs. They edged along, shoulders scraping rock. A shot cracked above. "Keep going," he said. "They can't ride it." The path spat them into juniper and stone. Somewhere below, water hissed. Thomas crouched, listening. No pursuit yet, just wind and river. He pointed downhill, half-mile to the wash, then cottonwoods, then home. "Home," the girl echoed. They reached the wash at dawn, past the ford. The cabin waited, low, solid, smoke lifting. The door swung wide. Mara stepped out first, shawl at her shoulders. Behind her, the widows fanned into the yard. Water heating, bedrolls aired, coffee boiling. Seeing them, Mara's eyes flicked from faces to wounds. "Inside," she said. "Talk later, hands first." They didn't argue. The widows moved like rain. Quiet, thorough, everywhere. Boots unlaced, coats stripped, cuts washed, poultices laid. The girl fought the touch, then sagged into it. The eldest breathed through the wrapping of her wrist, counting in Lakota. Thomas stared at the mug in his palms. He finally spoke. "They'll be back." "They will," Mara said. "What did they want?" The same as always. Fear, he looked at the girl. People they call wrong for existing. Mara set another mug down. Watchers are posted, she said. North Mesquite, South Ridge. The eldest leaned forward. We can't keep running and patching. They'll return with papers or fire. Her voice didn't shake. We choose now. Hide or stand. Thomas looked at the widows, women who had buried husbands, crossed winters that broke stronger ranches. They met his look without blinking. Eliza set a shotgun on the table, checked the bead, and nodded. Stand. They planned fast. By noon, snares lay in the arroyos, trip lines hummed under brush, and a trench soaked behind the barn waited any torch. The girl and the eldest strung wire. The widows taught hand signs to call danger without sound. Thomas cut loopholes in the sod wall and set angles that turned the yard into a funnel. At sundown, the riders appeared, 8 this time, a flag of borrowed authority on a stick. The cabin didn't look scared. It looked ready. They stopped at the gate. The lead man reined in. We're serving notice, he called. By law and order, vacate, return the girls. Mara stepped into the yard, palms empty. By law and order, she answered. Show the seal. He raised a paper. Eliza's shot clipped the stick, snapping the flag to dirt. The man flinched. Mara didn't. Paper without registry is wind, she said. Wind doesn't move stone. The riders shifted. One kicked forward. His mount snagged the hidden wire, stumbled, rolled. 2 more surged. The trench hissed, sucked mud, not flame. Hooves bogged. Formation broke. Last warning, Thomas called from the wall. Turn around. They tried bluster, insult. Savages, widows. Stray. The widows didn't waste bullets on pride. They shot ropes, reins, one saddle horn clean off. Twice, someone raised a rifle. Twice, a shot slapped it from his hands. Silence took the yard. The lead man stared at the broken flag, at the mud, at the women who hadn't moved. He listened. No cavalry, no cheering crowd, just wind and a bird. He swallowed. This won't end it. No, Mara said. It ends when you stop coming. She tipped her chin toward the road. Ride. They left, dust folded over them. Inside, nobody cheered. The widows put coffee back on. The girl laughed once, the sudden, breaking kind that turns to tears. The eldest pressed her bandaged wrist to her chest, then helped with bowls. Thomas waited for his hands to stop shaking. At dusk, they carried chairs outside. Someone started a hymn in Lakota. The girl learned the refrain and hummed along. Mara set a bundle in Thomas's lap. Inside lay a bone-handled knife, oiled, honed, initials of a man long buried worn into the grip. He would have liked how you fight, she said. Not loud, straight. Thomas stared at it, then at her. I thought I was done being needed. Mara smiled. You were wrong. He breathed once. Then I'm staying. The widows nodded. The girl leaned her head on the eldest's shoulder. Night rolled in like a roof. If this story steadied you, share it and comment. Subscribe for the next chapter of Grit and Grace. Tell us below, when the gate rattles, what will you protect?